What about navigating the evolving landscape of generative AI? How do you go about doing that in today's world with all the clutter that seems to be out there already?
There is the enterprise class customer, and that is bread and butter to what Neubloc. I'm the CEO of a narrow and generative AI strategic consulting firm and also implementation firm. And so our bread and butter is that we work with enterprise customers that at this point they have to start thinking about, all right, well, how do I convert myself from how do I get from non-AI or lightly AI?
Welcome to Emphasis Tech Talks, the podcast for business leaders navigating technical challenges to find competitive advantage and elevate your bottom line. Today we have Armando Viteri, and he's known as one of the leaders in the AI world today. So we wanted to get Armando on. Armando, we appreciate you taking the time to jump on with us here and share your expertise. I know that the folks listening to this will be excited to hear what you've got to say today.
Thank you so much for having me, and nothing better than being on a controversial topic like AI.
It is amazing how it's both part of the news cycle today and yet controversial at the same time, isn't it?
Sure is. In fact, one of the things I'll try and do in this podcast is it seems like 99.9% of all the conversation around AI seems to fall into one of two categories. Either it's the look at this cool thing I did with ChatGPT, or oh my God, we're all going to die. Hopefully, we can have a more rational conversation here of where the opportunities and the challenges are around AI, because clearly we are entering into a completely new age. And I don't think any of us, among even the most prescient, can completely have a crystal ball about where this all evolves. However, we do know the milestones in getting there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, Armando, why don't you tell us about your vision and where you see the future of technology going here, especially as it relates to AI?
Well, I'll kind of, that's such a broad question. It's hard to kind of do all of that. So I'll focus it more in on the topic of business. So here's where the opportunity is. On average, AI implemented correctly represents probably on the order of about 30 to 40% improvement in productivity for white-collar workers. Some cases 80%, in the case of marketing people, potentially software developers, etc. In other cases, less of an impact. But overall, to an enterprise, it's a fundamental shift in the economics of what that enterprise is, because they're getting so much more productivity, and I will argue so much more creativity, which is something that we all have a little bit tough time accepting, that AI is highly creative, but go spend 10 minutes with it and you'll figure out it's also highly creative. So it's a fundamental shift to what it means for businesses. So I think over time, you can see the signposts here. Over time, this impacts the fundamental operations, the running of everything but the smallest business. So I guess the corner ice cream store won't be fundamentally changed as a result of AI. Maybe their supply chain for ice cream will be. But other than that, all businesses get really impacted. And that's, whenever there is a step function change in technology, and I'm old enough that I've seen a few of these.
Yeah.
Maybe I could argue maybe that this one's even greater than the internet shift. It may be, right? But it's on the order of that, yeah. Right? We've seen a few of those fundamental shifts, and what winds up typically happening is that those people that early on latch on to the change, accept it, adopt it, are forward thinking about it, wind up emerging as the next generation powerhouses. Those people that deny, do the ostrich in the sand effect, etc. Those most likely either are greatly diminished, but in most cases, we can certainly rattle off. I'm old enough to rattle off dozens of companies in the technology world. They just don't survive. So
Right.
here's where are at exactly that juncture where there is great opportunity, but there's also a great deal of risk.
And that's, yeah, we see that as well. I mean, it's become very apparent already. Um, uh, we've seen cases where having a strong data warehouse, strong data set to be able to run AI against uh, is already providing an advantage. And so I can see how where it's not going to be too far down the road before we actually see AI in itself making the difference in mainstream businesses. So I couldn't agree more. So Armando, just kind of to expound on that a little bit. So what about navigating the evolving landscape of generative AI? How do you go about doing that in today's world with all the clutter that seems to be out there already?
Well, again, second complicated question of the day. Let me, for the sake of oversimplification, divide it into two clubs.
Mm.
There is the enterprise class customer, and that is bread and butter to what Neubloc. I'm the CEO of a narrow and generative AI strategic consulting firm and also implementation firm. And so our bread and butter is that we work with enterprise customers that at this point they have to start thinking about, all right, well, how do I convert myself from how do I get from non-AI or lightly AI over to an AI at the core company? And what I'm seeing, and this will be the first of my predictions, and I will be the first to say I could be wrong here. However, I'm seeing it from so many enterprise customers across all industries. What I'm seeing time and again is companies are thinking about generative AI in a fundamentally different way, in which they're thinking that there's a historic meaning the last 10 or 15 years, IT infrastructure concept based around the data lake. Just what the data warehouse, the data lake, etc. And that essentially involves just collect all your data that exists within the corporation and put it in some kind of machine readable form, and then have a variety of typically SaaS enterprise level software packages that attach themselves to those data warehouses that in turn attaches itself or provides that information to the user. In this world, it's a different architecture. So it's a big shift. In this world, you still have the data lake, but you wind up implementing what MIT wind up coining the term the lake house architecture. You have this lake house, which is you have a central pivot point that connects to the data lake. And then that central lake house winds up not only being the repository of the access to the data, but also it's the repositories of the correlations of the data, the insights in the data. In other words, and again, controversial term, the AI of the brain of the enterprise. That is the fundamental unit on which the enterprise runs. And then in turn, and again, time and again, our customers, which are Global 1000 companies, what they're doing is they're looking at, all right, on top of that AI of the brain, AI brain of the company,
right?
What assistants do I need to create that are going to interact with my workers? So there's two clumps of those that are getting developed. One is a role-based assistant. Okay, so be it an HR assistant, a marketing assistant, a sales assistant, customer support. For each role, there are these assistants being created. And then there's a second clump that are process-based assistants, supply chain, inventory, etc. Right?
Okay.
And then in the last phase of implementation, these assistants all get, which could be dozens over time inside of a larger company, these assistants eventually get all tied together so that it manages the workflows and the internal company processes. So what I've just described is a really fundamental shift in what a business looks like, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I like the way that you're breaking that out. So that's one of the problems that we've seen is that some organizations will try to just throw the term AI out there and just think that one central AI functionality is going to run everything. Along that line, Armando, um, what are the innovative solutions that you and your organizations are working on as it relates to enhancing these technology strategies?
Well, and my third complex question of the day. So, um, I will tell you what I will tell you the path that I don't like. That as a starting point. Uh, Unfortunately, November 30th, 2022, the day ChatGPT got announced.
Yeah, right.
He said that word so many times in the last 20 months that it still doesn't roll off the tongue. But
Yeah, I hear you.
ChatGPT got announced. From then, there was a land rush kind of mentality among investors, and
Mm-hmm.
500 companies got invested for more than $5 million each over a period of 90, 120 days,
Right.
without actually doing proper analysis on where the opportunity really was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the real opportunity is the architecture that I just described.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of a centralized core generative AI engine based on pick your favorite large language model, that central core engine that's been trained on not all the public information that it needs to operate, but then all the company proprietary data that's been trained to operate in. That model, with its variety of assistants, winds up being architecturally correct. Unfortunately, what got funded was little gadgets and widgets that are little productivity tools that for now are actually pretty productive. I use some of them every day, but we all know that Microsoft is going to do all of those. We know that Google is going to do all of it because they are the natural adjacent space. So that class of tools, these gadgets and widgets, especially in the productivity areas, are kind of one-offs, will be remembered with their tombstones quite well. However, they are not the direction of the AI industry. What is the direction of the AI industry is the architecture I described. Now, I only mentioned enterprise customers. I haven't mentioned where the startup opportunities are. And those are around companies that do the vertical market versions of that architectures targeting the SMB space. Because the SMB space can't afford to do the potentially 8-figure investment that is going to take maybe more for being able to do a full-fledged enterprise class architecture the way I just described, right? But there's a million opportunities for people going for individual sectors. In fact, one of my very favorite companies is a company called RE Tech, that what they're doing is they're doing exactly that version for real estate brokerages. Because real estate brokerage economics, if you really look at them, the economics of those businesses are terrible. By implementing generative AI, all of a sudden those become healthy businesses. Now you take that example, you apply it to any industry that you can think of, and you wind up with a whole broad class of super interesting startup companies that are providing these packaged solutions for these SMB companies so that they have exactly the same capabilities as what eventually a Fortune 50 company will be able to have access to, just in a different market or a different application space. So the architecture winds up being consistent. It's just the method by which they get delivered to that end customer, the end user inside of a business, winds up being different.
Yeah, that's a great point. And That's a lot of the reason why we wanted to put together a podcast like this, is so that we could get this kind of information out to you, the business owner, the business leader, and you can look forward to the technologies that are coming down the road, not just what's happening today. Because Armando, when you're talking about it, so you talked a little bit about historically how technology's changed, and we've seen that same kind of thing happen. So think 10, 15 years ago, it was all about the big enterprise creating their data lakes, and that was not available to the small business. And now today, that's readily available through the cloud platforms. Microsoft and Google, AWS, they all have relatively good options available to the small business, makes it affordable and so forth. So, Armando, I know we're running close on time here, but um, tell me what are your recommendations when someone comes to you and they say, we see the technology landscape changing, and it's a very competitive landscape. What are your recommendations for those folks?
Well, we've spent a lot. Historically, we've been an AI implementation company that focused at the departmental level in both small and large companies, right? Some manager came to us with something, some problem they wanted to solve. It's pretty easy. Package that up in a functional spec and put some engineers on it, and away we go. The whole landscape changed with ChatGPT because all of a sudden the discussion wound up becoming a C-suite discussion,
Mm-hmm.
which
Right.
wasn't something we ever experienced before. All of our discussions, or most of our discussion at this point, are large company C-suite, because you have a lot of executive managers right now that can spell AI, and they have a gut feeling that it's important, but they
Right.
don't know where to start. Exactly your question. So we eventually devised kind of a three-stage process that seems to be working pretty well. And the whole concept of it is, let's do it in little incremental measurable steps.
Right.
So there's
That's
always the opportunity to back off in a hurry before
that's
there's a
the way to
large
do it.
spend.
Yeah.
So what we do is we do a discovery process. Some people would call that a diagnostic. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, what we go in and we do educational sessions or an educational session at the high level for the executive staff. We then do departmental interviews, brainstorming sessions, where we
Mm-hmm.
talk about companies in departments in your industry, in your areas of expertise, are thinking about AI for these kinds of applications. Which ones of these are your pain points? You go through a series of these meetings, and at the end, you wind up with 30, 50 different applications for AI that at the departmental level they want. And then we do a final recommendation back to the executive staff of, look, of these, we believe that this 2 or 3 or 5 of these applications have the greatest impact with the least cost to develop and the least risk. Because one of the issues with AI is that unless you're really careful, they can turn into research projects, right? So we boil down the list about these few, and then the executive management gets to decide which of these, not which of these they're going to fund, but rather which of these they want to scope. So then we assign an architecture and project management team to scope them out, come up with the functional specs, etc., and then finally an architecture, and then finally come up with time and cost to develop it. Again, that's a stop point. That customer has the option to go no further after that. They just now know what it's going to cost to really do an implementation of these first few assistants. And then, of course, the third phase is the obvious one, which is we enter into an implementation phase. And then, of course, you iterate on that roadmap, those 30 or 50 assistants that need to get implemented. That becomes a roadmap over time. So it's a very measured kind of one toe in the water, maybe two
Yeah.
toes in the water the next time,
Yeah.
but a very measured approach to implement it.
Awesome. Well, that's the way that we always run our project. So making those small incremental steps, absolutely the way to do it. Armando, I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing your knowledge with us. and bringing that to the table here. Tell the group here, the audience, how can they get a hold of you? How can they follow up with you if they're interested in seeking more information?
Everyone here is welcome to reach out to me directly at Viteri, Viteri, at Neubloc.com, and also to visit our website directly, www.neubloc.com.
So, Armando, yes, thank you very much again for joining us and providing all this information. Everyone, reach out to Armando on LinkedIn, connect with him, follow him. He's a great resource for information. And this is David Clausen with Emphasis Technologies. Thanks for joining us, and till next time.